Welcome to Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. What if you could learn from experienced real estate investors, find out what got them to where they are now, get insight into their daily habits, and take these insights to inspire your own growth? Each week, Jonathan Green shares an in-depth look at the mindful approach to real estate investing. Jonathan is a lifelong real estate investor, advisor, and coach, as well as the founder and team leader of Streamlined Properties. Whether you're looking to start from scratch, get to the next level, or just for a straightforward and honest approach to real estate investing, Jonathan seeks to provide a free mentorship program you can take with you anywhere. Now, here's Jonathan.
Do you ever find yourself lost in real estate investing vortexes online, TikTok telling you how easy it is? Real estate investing is for everyone. And in some ways, it really is. But this show is different. This is about the unflashy path to multifamily real estate that anyone can follow. And that's something that my guest Lee Yoder and I talked about, because he said, look, if I can do it, anyone can do it. And we go through his entire blueprint from beginning to end, from how he stuck with the W-2 until eventually leaving the W-2 and what he's doing now. So this is a path that anybody can follow. Stay tuned for Lee Yoder. This is Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, Lee Yoder. Lee is the founder and CEO of Threefold Real Estate Investing, where they help investors achieve passive cash flow and growth and wealth through multifamily. Lee left his W-2 not that long ago, I think probably like 7 years. We'll get the skinny on it soon. And he's been in the multifamily game since. Lee, welcome to the show.
Jonathan, really happy to be here, fan of the show, and glad to be a guest today.
Yeah, no, it's always great to talk to people who haven't been in it as long as I have, because I like to figure out where the journey started. Mm-hmm. I think it started with you with the famous purple book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Why did you pick up the book? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, great question. I was kind of just working a corporate job. I'm a physical therapist by trade, but I got on with the company. I was only 2 years into being a physical therapist, and I came in with the company, and I'd been working with them for a year, one of those 2 years. And then I became a clinical director with them, working in the office. It was a startup company, was doing like clinical director of operations type stuff, doing no physical therapy, not missing physical therapy at all. Felt like, man, this is what I like doing. I like building something. It's very entrepreneurial because this company was a startup. I was kind of building out one of the divisions in the company and answering directly to the founder and just loving that work. But then feeling like, man, I don't know if this is long term, because, you know, what a lot of people struggle with climbing the corporate ladder, like just a lot of time away from family, just feeling like you can't balance that the way you want to and live the life you want to live, even though while I was at work, I was really enjoying that. So the reason how I got to Rich Dad Poor Dad was just kind of looking like, okay, well, if I leave this corporate job, I felt like I could not go back to physical therapy, because it's like, that's not what I want to do. What I want to do is more of this.
Right. Why would you leave to just go back? It's good that you have it. I always say to people when they leave, well, your worst case scenario is you have a skill set already, so you could go back.
Yes.
But I know what you're saying. Like, why leave to just plan on going back?
Yeah. And it was like, I just know I don't want to do that. So maybe short term, but that's not what I want to do. So I was like, what the heck do I want to do? You know, what else is out there? And so just started networking with people, reading some books, and, Rich Dad Poor Dad gets recommended a lot. So I ended up reading that. And that was a light bulb moment for me, Jonathan, that it was like, okay, wow, it seems like there's this whole other game that I can play. It's not just, which W-2 do I want to do? Do I want to be a physical therapist for, 35 years, or do I want to climb the corporate ladder for 35 years? It was like, there's actually some very different options out there that I felt like I'd never heard of. No one ever told me about investing in real estate, or like just being a business owner, being an entrepreneur. I just didn't feel like that was ever presented to me as an option. And Rich Dad Poor Dad kind of opened my eyes to that. So that led to more networking. I had a friend at church who was in real estate full time. My dad is in construction, so I grew up around construction. So just real estate, and I love math. I love spreadsheets. So the more I started learning, I'm like, man, I feel like this real estate thing could be my thing, because again, I was kind of looking for something entrepreneurial, able to build something. I'm like, man, I could build a real estate portfolio. And the more people I talked to that were in it, I was like, yeah, I think I want to do that. And my friend from church said, well, Lee, could you be more flexible in your job? Could you do your job from home so that you could, start real estate on the side? And the answer for me was no. This was pre-COVID. This company now is very much remote, but it was not then.
Of course.
Then it was in the office as much as possible. And I was actually moving toward a promotion, and I talked to the VP of the company, and I was like, can I kind of still leave at 5:15, 5:30 each day? And he was like, no, when you're this next, like, you're going to be staying even more. And I'm like, man, that's kind of a line in the sand. So what I decided to do, Jonathan, was to go back to doing physical therapy, actually home health physical therapy, but have a real estate side hustle. And so I left that corporate job at the end of 2016. It wasn't until the fall of 2017 that we got our first real estate deal. It was a single family flip, but that was kind of how I, came to Rich Dad Poor Dad and what I decided to do as far as kind of getting started into my real estate journey.
Yeah, that's smart, though, because I think a lot of newer people are just looking to get out of the 9 to 5. You just leveraged down the 9 to 5 and made it more, I guess you were probably doing it on your own. So it was easier then to make your own hours and create time for real estate and make sure you have enough time for family without having to. I would be that. I mean, I worked for the government for the first 10 years of my working career, and that was 80-hour weeks. So I remember thinking, and then I had kids, and the reason that I left the government job was I can't work 80 to 100 hours a week.
Yeah.
I want to hang out with my kids. It doesn't make sense. So that's really smart, because I do think people are looking to leave W-2 too early. You were looking to keep some runway so you could figure out how real estate was going to work into your life at the time.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, I took about a 30% pay cut, Jonathan. But, one other thing I would say to young investors or people that might want to follow a similar path is my wife and I were living well below our means. She was already only working, once every week or two. She's an RN, so we're both in healthcare, but we already had kids. And so she was mostly staying home with them, just working every once every week or two.
Yeah.
But we were living well below our means. So to take that 30% pay cut didn't change our lifestyle, but only because we were already living that much under, the income that we had. And so a lot of people aren't doing that. And so it gives you less options. So that was one thing that we did well that allowed us to make this move, to kind of take a step back income wise, but to allow us to do something that would let us take a huge step forward.
Yeah, I think that's the difference between an entrepreneurial mindset, which you have, and what I think people have now is they think they want to be an entrepreneur, but they really want is just money.
Yeah, right.
I don't even think they really want time freedom. They just see Lamborghini, that looks awesome. I want a big house. That's not, if that's your dream, there's so many ways that it's going to go wrong, because you're going to try to go way too fast to get there. Are you seeing that now with people who are getting in the game, especially in the syndication game now, because you've been in that part for a while?
Yeah, Jonathan, it's a really long runway. I mean, I think if it's a long-term game, and it's very much the compound effect where things happen very slowly for a long time, and you're building for a long time. But if you stick with it, it's going to be a hockey stick at some point. It's going to take off. But you're going to look at people that job I left for years and years. And honestly, I'm probably still maybe close to my annual income. I can probably still look at those people that stayed in that corporate job and continue, and their income has always been outpacing mine. Now, I own some big pieces of some big apartment buildings, and that's...
And they go home at 8:30.
Yeah, that too. Yeah, the time freedom. You're absolutely right. I've got a lot of that. But I'm just building this snowball, but it takes a long time to pay off. So you're absolutely right. If you said, well, what I really want to do is make an extra 25 grand, probably your better route is just move up within your company.
Yeah, for sure.
Take a job somewhere. Someone comes and recruits you and go work there for a pay raise. You're gonna be better. This is hey, I'm going to take a step back and delay gratification for a long time, but then the payoff's going to be huge, and the time freedom. I actually do value time freedom over money in the short term. You're absolutely right. That's a big difference, and I do see a lot of people that think, I'm going to do entrepreneur because they kind of see that end game. It's they forget that that's 10 years from now. That guy with Lamborghini, that was after 10 years or 15 or 20 years. And
and it's leased. So.
Yeah, that too. But he might have he lived on his buddy's couch for the first 3 years because he had no money because he was putting it all back into the business. He was putting everything back in the business, right? Yeah, they missed that part.
Well, I mean, that's part we were talking before about social media in general. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where it's hard for anyone who's new to really any field, but specific to real estate investing, since of course that's what we're here talking about. Yep. It's so easy to go on and think that everybody's successful, and they don't realize that for, 9 years, they were just grinding.
Oh, yeah.
It's the thing that what people say, oh, I can't believe they're such an overnight success. No one's an overnight success. They worked for 10 years behind the scenes before anyone looked at anything. And then they finally got to the part where that compound effect happened. Don't you think that most people just quit while they're on the ladder up? They're probably really, really close, but they're just like, they don't know because they can't see how close they are. So eventually they give up, after 6 months, when if they just went 7.5 months, they would have gone, full momentum forever if they wanted.
I think 100%. And that's why, podcasts like this, Jonathan, are so important to, and even today, I still like listening to podcasts and hearing others. It just gives me that encouragement. Like, okay, yeah, that guy, who throw anybody, Grant Cardone, anybody, like, oh man, after 10 years, he had 200 units, whatever. And like, but then the next year was 4, the next year was 1,000, next year was 5,000, right? Like, it's that but you have to keep reminding yourself of that because it is long at first. And I'll say all the time, like, if you said to me, I want to buy a 100-unit apartment building, you very much have to be okay with, hey, 11 and a half months from now, you'll own 0 units. But then in that before, on the 12th month, you buy a 100-unit property. You didn't go from 0, you went from 0 units to 100 in one day. One day you had 0, the next day, but it was that whole 12 months that you were working. That's what got you the 100 units on the 365th day, right? But you're right. You can go 11 and a half months. You've done a ton of stuff. You've built a ton of momentum, but you don't see your unit count hasn't changed. You haven't bought, and it's so hard, man. It's really hard. I've been through it, and I've been through it again. I mean, it's been since last October since we purchased anything, and
I haven't been buying at all. I mean, now I'm looking at syndications more, but I know a lot of my friends in syndications like yourself, and they're like, the deals just, they're not there. We have enough assets.
Not good ones. But,
yeah. Something interesting though, when I was looking through Threefold on your site, you guys you started small. Like you started at like, an 8-unit and a 16-unit. Talk about that a little, because I think that's really helpful to know that you can do syndications with, less people and smaller terms, but that's a very safe, I think, like enter into what you want to be at 60 units or then at 100 units, because doing the 0 to 100, if you've done your due diligence and you know what you're in for, is good. But if you can do an 8-unit and then you do a 16 unit, you can do a 50 unit. Right. Like you're expanding your practices as you go. So what trajectory did you take with that? Why do you guys start small? Because I think that's really smart.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there's 2 ways. You can either go join a team or join somebody that has the experience and leverage that and just be a part of that team. But if you kind of want to start yourself, I would start with your own money and start small. And that's absolutely what we did. So I left that corporate job at the end of 2016. The fall of 2017, we flipped a house. So we just did that on our own, use an equity line of credit against our house. My wife and I did that, our money, our work. I mean, we hired some of it out, but put a ton into it, made some money. And just leveraged that into the next year. In 2018, we bought a duplex. Again, did that ourselves. We had some money from the flip. We had our HELOC again, and we did a duplex, sold that in less than a year, rented it out, kind of sold a proof of concept of, rental real estate. Yeah. The next year, 2019, we bought a 16-unit, brought in a property management company to partner with us.
Sorry, 1, 2 to 16, right?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, that's a nice jump.
Yeah, and it was that 16-unit. We brought in our first investor. It was my in-laws. Brought them in, just did a joint venture, actually. Hey, you can have 50% for bringing the money and doing a little bit of work. We'll have 50% for finding the deal, putting it together, and doing most of the work.
Yeah.
And then soon after that, and that, in 2019, got an 8-unit, got a 10-unit. And so we had 34 units, these small multifamilies, just joint ventures with close family, friends, doing 50-50 joint ventures. And then, 2020, market kind of took off after COVID settled down and government started, printing $4 trillion and handing it out like candy. Assets took off, right? So we sold that entire portfolio at the end of 2020, and that's when I quit. That's when I quit my W-2. So we took all that equity and put it in our savings account and said, "Here's our runway. We can live off this
now
for three or 4 years." So kind of your point, like worst case scenario is I go back to being a physical therapist. My wife could go back to being an RN if we had to. That's not what we want. We want her to be home. We started homeschooling our kids that year, but it's like I can go back to work, but this gives me 3 to 4 years to make this happen. And then so in 2021, we started syndicating, and to your point, John, it was kind of like just the next step. Like our first syndication was a 45 unit, but it was actually 2 8 units and a 29 unit that we bought as a package. So I'd already done an 8 unit, I'd done a 16, and this was 29 was bigger than anything I'd done, but it wasn't that big of a step. And now we had 7 investors instead of 1. And now we're raising 550,000 instead of 100,000. So it was just kind of that next step. And then the next one we did was a 47 unit, but much bigger raise. It was $1.3 million raise. And, just today we're trying to do 100 units and up and, raising 2 to 3 million at a time, maybe more than that. So we just, kind of taken, the next step, each year or two.
Yeah, there's some great points in there. I mean, I love the way that you started. I think a great point that you made is that you started with your own money.
Yeah.
I think it's really important for investors to do their own proof of concept. And then you slowly worked in your in-laws, which family and friends are great for a first one when they're in and you're all, like we're going to be okay.
Yeah.
The asset's good. And then you're just continually upgrading each time, another friend. And then, like, hey, okay, now. But that's something that I really haven't heard of, someone selling off the whole portfolio. It's smart because I've always said, when the timing's right, I'll sell anything. I don't care.
Yeah.
It does not make if someone wants to give me $1 million for my house and it's worth, when I bought it was 600, I will sell it.
Right.
I'll just get another one.
Yes.
Like, it's fine. I don't care. And if there's nothing on the market, I will take the money and go to a rental for a while. I don't care. This is what I learned from my dad. So I think, how did you get you're making like extremely smart choices on the way in. Whereas I think a lot of people, like we were saying, they're getting FOMO, they're moving too quickly. How did you stay so grounded to make these very, very smart trades and then even go into syndication very smartly? That's a great first syndication, 29, 8 and 8. You're already at 16, so 29 is like not a big deal.
I appreciate that. I feel like my wife helps. She's more risk adverse, so she really slows me down and makes
calm me down a little. Yeah, you don't need that 170. You're a little too big for your britches.
That's
now.
right. That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Makes me kind of think through it. Prayer is a big part of it for me, and trying to make sure I'm being led by what I think the Lord has for us, and not getting too far ahead in that sense. And then networking. I mean, guys that have done it before. Again, podcasts like this. There's some guys and girls that I really identify with. I was actually listening to a podcast earlier today. One of my favorites. His name is Brian Burke. He's been on.
I've had him on.
Have you? Okay.
Yeah. Hands-off investor. I love Brian.
Brian is, Brian has done so much.
Yeah.
He's timed the market really well.
Yeah.
And Brian's not buying anything right now. And I keep,
not in 2 years.
I know.
Because I recorded with him at least a year and a half ago, and he was like, nope, we're good. We're just doing debt.
I know. And I'm not even close to the same position as Brian. So I'm still buying. I mean, I don't have, we're in a little bit different position. And I think it's okay to buy. So I'm not, listen, Brian, I'm not buying until Brian buys.
You just have to buy smart. Yeah,
absolutely. But guys like Brian, I'm like, okay, Brian knows more than I do. And he's being very cautious right now. It just listening to guys like that, I listen to a lot of macroeconomics, Jonathan, Mastering the Market Cycle by Howard Marks, and talking about how the market swings and you've got to be careful. So just trying to, here's a good quote. And I can't remember who told me this, but he said, Lee, you just have to make sure you're not just thinking like an entrepreneur, because I am an entrepreneur and I have to think like an entrepreneur, but you also have to think like an investor. And I didn't start that long ago, but I can still remember back when in Ohio and in Cincinnati, you could buy stuff for under 50 grand a unit. And things have gone so far, so fast, but I'm still grounded in I'll go back to the 1% rule, Jonathan. I mean, you mentioned Bigger Pockets at one point. I remember one of the first things I learned on Bigger Pockets, the 1% rule. And it feels like sometimes people
the easiest metric to at least figure out something quickly. It doesn't work as well now, but in some states it does.
In some states it does. And maybe it should, maybe it still should work, right? It's right. We've kind of said, 1% rule. Well, maybe it's because people are overpaying, so maybe, sometimes you just go back to those, for people the 1% rule means if I'm going to buy an apartment building or a single family house, I don't care what it is, for $100,000 a unit. So if I'm paying $100,000 for a house or $10 million for a 100-unit apartment, so I'm buying $100,000 a unit, I need to rent that apartment or that house for $1,000 a month.
Yeah.
And it is hard to hit that today, but I still want to. And so
so do I. That's why I don't buy.
And that's exactly right. But you see other people bend on that and they're buying it, way below 1% rule. Man, that's where you got to be careful. So you try to come back to the numbers, try not to change your numbers, change your underwriting just because it's so hard to get a deal. Again, Jonathan, when we left, like I said, we had 3 to 4 years of a runway. Some people, they get started and they still have the job. So you want to be in a position where you don't have to buy and just have some good mentors around you, stick to your underwriting to make sure that, you want to go through so many deals and say no so many times that when you say yes, it's because you see one that goes, whoa, this is way different than it. Like, this is so much better. What's going on? We're getting close on one right now. And I kept, my wife and I both kept going, this isn't going to go through.
Where's the, where's the cemetery
where's the catch?
underneath?
What's going on? Like, this is way cheaper than everything else. And there's some things about it. It's very rural. All right. So it's well outside. It's not real close to any real big city that a lot of the big investors want to invest in. So there's some things that we're like, okay, that's why, but it's even cheaper than that. It's like, okay, all those things, it's still a really good deal, and nothing's a really good deal right now. Well, that's the one you go after, but you're going to have to go through a lot to find that one.
Yeah, I like what you said about 1% rule. The only caveat I would say for newer investors who are thinking directly on that, if you're seeing a deal that's like 1.5%, like it's probably not in the greatest spot and has a lot of capex.
Sure.
So you have to balance the scales based on what you know. We know a lot, so we can look at 1% and be like, I want to hit that. I know why. But I feel like people get tempted by cash flow now. And if you're getting a ton of cash flow, there's probably a problem. That you don't know about if you're new.
For sure.
Like, you're going to need an entire new plumbing system on 50 units. That's not going to be great.
Or you're in a bad area. Yep.
Yeah, right.
Numbers look great in bad areas.
Yeah, and like in my opinion, I don't know about what the overall on your portfolio, but like I look at it like C- and D+. It's not for me, but I think it's for people who are going to do all C- and D+.
Yes.
They know what they're getting into.
Yes.
They understand the tendencies. They know the eviction laws. They know what they're dealing with.
Yep.
I think it's very hard for someone who's looking for B class and then they choose a C- and they think, well, this is going to be no problem. You're in that. That's what gets people in trouble. Do you agree with that? And do you see that when you're looking at deals too?
Yeah, I'll tell our investors, or if I'm trying to educate an investor, passive investor, when you invest with someone, you want to make sure they've done pretty much exactly what they say they're going to do on this next deal that you're thinking about investing in, that they've done that a bunch of other times. And you're absolutely like, C class in this area or a similar area, an area they know well, with the similar value add strategy, whatever, like you want to make sure they've done almost exactly that. And that back to your, what you said, Jonathan, about me starting small and using my own money. By the time I was asking for money, it was like, I'm just asking you to jump in with me to do what I've already done. And then we did it with a couple people, like, in-laws and my parents and, close friends. And then when we went to other people, it's like, hey, would you want to do this? I've already done it a couple of times. I did it with some other investors. We did well. We're going to do it again. We need more investors. Do you want to do it with us? Right. And then we just kept growing that. But you're absolutely right. It's so different.
That's not a pitch. That's an opportunity. And that's how I think it's reframed. When you have built the track record, you're just offering an opportunity. So if someone doesn't want it, no problem. Like, no offense. It's not like that hard pitch that we're getting a lot of the time just from like anything in our texts or DMs all day. And I think that's a separation. One other thing you said that I wanted to touch on too is to not change your underwriting. And you and I, both as people who are obsessed, I love spreadsheets. I do everything on them, but I actually don't do a bunch of deal analysis because I don't go big in multifamily. I will do syndications, so someone else is doing that. But the thing that I found about spreadsheets is it's so easy to just change one number and make a deal work that it can really be like the devil in disguise.
So easy.
Because you can say, well, they said, the regular occupancy is, 80%. And you're like, I think I can do better. Let me put it up to 92%. Wow, look, everything looks great now on the back end. And then you get a crap product because you're just trying to move it too quickly because all you have to do is manipulate the numbers. Have you seen that? And if you have the entrepreneurial spirit and your wife is the brakes, sometimes you're probably like, hey, well, what if we do this? And she has to say, no. Put it at the lower number because that's what we want. Yeah,
absolutely. No, the exit cap rate is another huge one, Jonathan. Right? It's like if I'm buying at a 7 cap and I say, okay, I'm going to sell at a 7 cap. Well, if I say, but what if I sell at a 6.5 cap? I mean, that's a huge difference, and that might be right. So, I'm moving my numbers around constantly. I mean, I love underwriting. I love my underwriting spreadsheet. I can wake up first thing in the morning on a Sunday morning, and I'm like, oh, I have another. What if I change this one? And I'll just go to my underwriting, and an hour will go by, and all I'm doing is just changing numbers in my underwriting. But I think the key there, Jonathan, is like, I might sell at a 6.5 cap. That might actually happen, but man, I better be okay if I sell to 7. I better be okay if I sell to 7.5. So I think that's where it is like finding that range. Like you probably know in your gut, 6.5, that could happen. Maybe that's best case scenario. And maybe you share that with your investors, but maybe you sell it at 7, maybe you sell it at 7.5. And I would consider that and probably share that with your investors as well and be comfortable with that. Hey, this might just be a base hit if things go south and we sell it at 7.5 cap. So I just think you got to find that range, and you probably know what that realistic range is, and be okay with the downside scenario as well as the upside.
Yeah, always under promise, over deliver. And I do that to myself too. I think you need to do that in self-analysis. When I'm flipping, my ARV is like the absolute worst case scenario. I know it's not going to sell for that, but that's what I put in, and I can look at the profit. I'm like, that would be okay. Like, I'll take that. And then I usually beat it by like at least 50 grand. And then it feels like a windfall.
Yes.
You know, because I know what I'm doing, but I still want to be like really cautious to just make sure, as you said, especially when you're holding, you're the stored for other people's money. You want them to know like, hey, okay, maybe this is between a 6 and a 7.5. We really think 7.5 looks okay, but like, I'm going to do the numbers at 6 because this is what I really think is safer. And then we're all going to like have a celebration if we even get, anything above it. That's just smarter investing instead of, putting the max, max on the end for the ARV and then not realizing that the market's in flux in some areas.
That's right. Yep. And the only problem with that, Jonathan, is it makes it harder to win deals when you underwrite like that. Right.
Yeah, you're right.
But that's kind of goes back to what we were talking about. You got to stick to that. And then you're going to be really happy when you do win a deal, because you're going to go, man, even if this thing, like in your scenario, even if it's worst case scenario, I'm still going to be happy with it. That's when you want to buy, is when you're even happy with that downside scenario.
Yeah. And on the syndication side, what I've found from talking to so many syndicators, the more deals that you do and the more experience you have, the more contacts you've made, you can win all the time when you're not the highest offer. You're winning based on your reputation, how you do your due diligence, not just the due diligence that you're doing, and how you're presenting your price. Because if you just present a price that's lower than what they want and you just leave it at that, that doesn't help them. If you say, look, I brought in my experts, the entire heating system definitely needs an overhaul, they know that. So you're just telling them things that are already available that are being worked in. I think that gives much better leverage. Have you found that as you've grown between these portfolios and moving up, that it gives you much more credibility when you're looking at deals versus, someone who was like the brand new you at the time versus you now? Yeah.
Well, yeah, your example is a great one, Jonathan. And if you said that to them, then what you're saying is, and my purchase price reflects me having to do that. So I'm not going to give you a purchase price that's inflated, and I probably know that. And then I'm going to come in during due diligence, go, oh yeah, but I have to come down 200 grand.
Well, right? Yeah, that's a classic new investor move because they don't know. So to me, if I'm a seller of a large asset, I only want to work with pros. Because I just don't want to. I mean, if someone offers you $1 million more than the next person, like there's a problem. It sounds great, but it's not going to be great.
And it doesn't make any sense. That too, Jonathan. Brokers only want to work with pros.
Oh yeah, I always say that because obviously I'm in the residential game. I buy commercial, but as an agent, I'm residential and do some commercial. But like the commercial high end game, it's who you know.
Oh yeah,
there's nothing about high end commercial real estate that even matches residential, where you have like newbies throwing out $1 million offer and they win. That doesn't work in commercial. No, you're not even getting in the door. Really, they won't even answer the calls unless you have a vetted reputation and they know you're bringing a vetted buyer to the table, because it's not worth anybody's time at that point.
That's right. And that goes all the way back to what you said earlier, John, just starting small. You start that way so that you do build up a little bit of a track record. And then again, when I was going after that 45 unit, that was 2 8s and a 29, I could tell the broker, well, I did an 8, a 10, and a 16. And so this is a little bit of a step up, but you can trust me because I've done this. And then once I'd done the 45, I could do a 47. And then, so that's all. It's important because you're right. The brokers and the sellers want to work with someone that is for sure going to close and going to do it professionally.
Exactly. I really don't think the price is relevant, of course, but I mean, closing is what matters. If you have someone who's already a little bit flimsy before due diligence, it's just, you're not risking a $3 million deal on that. It makes no sense to no one, because that broker is going to get fired by their client right away. Right. If they bring someone and say, hey, this is the deal, take this deal, they take it and it flops right away in due diligence because someone asked for, $250 because they don't like the stoves in all of the 80 units. That's just insanity.
That's a really bad look. Yep.
Yeah. Hey, it's Jonathan. I hope you're enjoying the episode with Lee Yoder. This guy's completely straightforward, tells it like it is, and I hope you're getting a lot from it. This is the midway point of the show, and I just want to remind you of one important thing. One of the best ways that you can help the podcast grow is to share it with your friends. If you have other real estate investor friends and you go to real estate meetups, it's a great way to help them catch on, listen to all of these episodes, this being all the way up there at 168. There's a lot of material for them to go through. I would personally appreciate it. And if, while you're doing that, you and them also leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts, it will really help us grow. Let's get back to the show with Lee. What's been the hardest part for you in your growth? Because you've had a very steady growth and it looks like you're on a really strong trajectory here. But what's been the hardest part for you kind of organizing and growing this into what you have now?
Yeah, we've complained. I've complained a lot about it's hard to find good deals. So that's I just say like real estate. I know there's parallels to other businesses, but I just think of like owning other businesses, like I don't know, a grocery store or something, and like sales slow sometimes, but there's always people shopping at your grocery store, right? With real estate, we've gone a year with no sales, with not buying anything. And so that's kind of unique and it's uniquely challenging. It's challenging just in your head to stay in the game and not go chase something else. Cause like, oh, this isn't working. Let's go buy car washes because everybody's doing car washes today. That's very challenging. I would say the other thing, Jonathan, is the more you buy, the more you realize how important operations is. And we use third-party management early on. And I think it's a great way to get started because, we were working with professionals that knew exactly what they were doing when we didn't know what we were doing. But we got to a point where after working with them for, 3 or 4 years, we felt like, okay, now we do know what we're doing. And I think we can do it a little bit better. And so over the past year, it's been over a year now, we brought all property management in-house. And that was
awesome.
A huge undertaking. I mean, that was building a whole nother business. That's not an asset management business that's just buying investments and bringing investors in. This is now a property management business. And it was a much harder business in a lot of ways to stand up and get going. And so operations is extremely challenging in multifamily. You're dealing with people are emotional and challenging. And sometimes they don't get along with each other. And sometimes they start fires and sometimes they don't pay their rent.
Yeah.
So that's been the most challenging, but it's gone really well. Actually, I'm really happy, really proud of our property management company. It allows us to operate even better. So, but that is tough. It's easy just to look at numbers. Like, you and I both like spreadsheets. The spreadsheets don't tell you anything about your property management company and how well it's going to operate because that's who decides if you hit those numbers in your spreadsheet or not. That's challenging. It's very difficult.
Yeah, that's really, I think vertical integration is always the smartest, but I do think people might try it too soon. Yeah. So I think you really pick the time, you learn from your company and say, we can do this. It's going to save you a lot of money in the long run. In the short run, it's probably going to cost you more because you're going to have to hire in, figure out the system, see what works and what doesn't, because you're not under their hood like they were when they were running it for you.
Yeah.
But I've always said that, when you're getting your first property, whether it's a single family, 2-family, 4-family, you're going to rent it, I would not hire property management early because I don't think you can learn anything.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that? When you guys were starting, it's like, well, we have to learn how to landlord because if we can landlord 4, we have to learn if we even want to landlord 8. It's not easy, as you were saying. Property management is very, very hard. You're dealing with like people's real problems. Like someone's relatives dies, they're going to be gone. They forgot to pay. What are you going to do? Kick them out? If someone gets sick, they can't pay. They have medical bills. Like these are things that I grew up with my dad saying, hey, go get the rent from these people. This is why they're not paying. And I'm like, well, that doesn't sound like that much fun. But I learned that early on. Yeah. Did you guys learn that in the beginning? Like, hey, this is a people business. Yeah,
we managed our duplex. So we did a flip and then the next year we did a duplex and we managed that. And so we didn't have much experience with it. If we wouldn't have jumped right into a 16 unit, if we had done another duplex or another quad, we would have managed that.
I wouldn't have managed a 16 myself either.
That was kind of that in-between number. And then we got an 8 unit and a 10 unit right after it. So we went from a duplex to 34 units pretty quick. And so I was glad to have the third party. But it's really good to get some experience because to your point, like you learn the business and what it takes. So you kind of have a respect for your property management company, but also an expectation. Like, hey, it's not that hard to get these units rented. Like, what do you guys, what are we missing here? Is rent to it? So you learn to respect it, but also question it in the right way. So I think that is great. I think it's great If you start really small, manage those yourself. As you grow a little bit, you probably want to partner with a professional, and then maybe you get to some point that you want to bring it back in house.
Right. Yeah. And some people decide later, like, you know what, that's taking up too much time or too many resources. So it's safer to go to, because when you're at the higher units, you're going to get the best property management. You know, your 2 to 8 unit property management is just like Bob off the street. You know, they don't want, you know, the big companies don't want your 6 unit to manage. And if they do, they don't care about it because they have, you know, 5,000 units.
And it's hard to be efficient on that thing.
You can't be.
No, you can't. So that property management company, you know, they got to take a trip to your 6 unit, you know, once every couple of weeks or whatever. It's just
for
very
one
inefficient.
heater. Right.
Yeah, versus the big boys that own a 450 unit. You know, you put 5 or 6 staff on top, and you can run that very efficiently. Yeah. So completely different. You're right.
Yeah. That's interesting. So now you guys are looking to go like 100 and up. Is that your marker for what you're looking at now?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, and what's the biggest that you've had? Is in the 60s or something?
We've done. It's funny, you know. I'll tell people, like, you know, the big boys, they won't do anything under 100, and a lot of times they won't even do anything under 150, or sometimes their numbers 200, whatever. So we've like just gone right up to that 100 unit mark. So we own 2 96 units and a 95 unit. Yeah. So 2 96s and a 95, and then we have a 64. Yeah. So we want to that 100 unit mark. And it's different areas, different classes. We pretty much do C plus class, and B minus, and we're Midwest. And so 100 units is what kind of that line that can afford a full-time property manager and a full-time maintenance guy. And we really like to hit that. So at all of our properties, and the 64 units, a little bit of a hybrid, we use our property manager that's at the 96 unit that's close to that. Yeah. But then we have 2 maintenance guys. So, but our other ones, it's a property manager and a maintenance. Now, a couple of them, like, they work 30 hours a week, not 40, because even 96 is a little bit small. Like, I wish all of our 96 units were actually 130, because a property manager can still do 130, but the 130 covers their cost better than a 96, right? So, but that's why we want to be at that number, because then we put a property manager on site, a maintenance guy on site, and then we're just managing 2 people that run the property for us.
Right. Yeah, that's the trickle-down effect of the smart management, instead of always having to just manage the entire one person and then wonder what everybody else is doing under them.
Yes. Right.
Yeah. So is the portfolio for Threefold all in Ohio, or have you branched out of Ohio?
Yeah, right now it's all in Ohio. Cincinnati obviously is right on the border of Kentucky and Indiana, so we do look in Kentucky and Indiana. We just like this general area. Kentucky and Indiana are similar as far as like being landlord friendly and similar taxes, similar demographic, all those things. So far we're kind of southwest and central west Ohio, just pretty local. Everything's, we have one that's 2 hours away from us, but most of ours are under an hour. But yeah, we would go 2 or 3 hours anywhere in Ohio and Indiana and Kentucky. We kind of want to be within that half day's drive for right now.
Yeah, but don't you think it makes Threefold more attractive as a syndicator to know that you've stuck to these markets that are all close by?
So. Yeah, I think so.
I like when someone wants to go into another market and they've done very well, but I don't want to be the first one into the new market.
Right.
As an LP, I'm just like, let me just wait out and see if Phoenix works to see. Yep. But it gives that level of confidence. Like, we know our backyard. This is what we do. And then you can, like you said, now you have enough units where you can say, well, we'll just go over the border here. Yeah. It's close by, same management, similar style, and that will work.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think the biggest problem in the syndication world is right now? Because we were talking, again, we're both on LinkedIn a lot. We're looking at a lot of stuff. But I've found that there's a lot of good marketers out there. So for someone who's looking to invest, who has a lot of money, they're thinking, hey, syndications are for me. What should they look out for? Because I think it's tough out there for people to tell what's what. They should read Hands Off Investor by Brian Burke.
That is a great book.
Your top one, Best Ever Syndication book by Joe Fairless from Best Ever. Those are great, but you really have to talk to other people who've invested in syndications. What are some things you found that people should watch out for?
I think that the main thing right now that's showing up is it's all businesses are hard to cash flow, to make profitable. And multifamily is going through a phase right now where income is stagnant to down in some markets, and expenses are going up. I mean, I say we're seeing the bad side of inflation as apartment owners. 2021 and 2022 was all good inflation. It was all rent inflation, income side inflation. That's stopped. I mean, some markets, it's very negative. I mean, I'm happy to be in the Midwest where we're still positive. But honestly, I'll be honest with you, Jonathan, our portfolio, it's pretty, we buy stuff that the rents are under. So like our rents are still going up, but the market rent is not going up, and really hasn't really gone up for like 2 years. It's really fairly stagnant, and expenses have gone up. Our taxes went up. 2023 was our reassessment year in Ohio. So 2024, we all started paying our increased taxes. We do it every 3 years here. Insurance, everybody knows insurance is way up. Everybody knows labor costs are up. So our staff want to make more, and so do our contractors. Material costs are up, electricity up, water up, all that. So it's a really hard time to cash flow. So if you're looking at investing in a syndication, and you're noticing that it looks like they're stretching to make their cash flow numbers work, but then they're promising this big exit, this big back end, that's what I would be very hesitant with. I would want to know, okay, they're getting in at a really good basis based on the rent. Again, go back to that 1% rule, maybe. Like, are we close to that? And you put out some caveats, and it's very important, Jonathan. The 1% rule works much better in a C class than it does A class. It doesn't work at all in A class. They can run so much more efficiently because our expenses are generally 50% of our rent, of our income. A class, it's like 30%. So there's some things that are very different, right? But on our stuff, like, are you pretty close to the 1% rule? Like, does it look like they're overpaying per unit? Are they forecasting that rent's going to that market rent is going to make some decent jumps over the next year or two? I don't know. But, I think there's a lot of signs that say we're going to a recession. Rent's probably going to keep going down or at least stay flat if we're in a recession. So, man, I've always thought, Jonathan, cash flow is the thing you can count on more than appreciation. So if we know we're getting in at a good basis, we know that the rent at the property is $200 under market. So even if market rent does come down, we're still going to increase rent. And we can show you that day one, we're going to have good cash flow. But as we increase and take away that $200 premium, rent's going to go, or our cash flow is going to go up even more. That's a story you should be able to get behind versus, hey, we're going to put a bunch of the money in the property and make this, turn this C class into a B class and raise rent by all much. And like our market rent's going to keep going up. But we're not going to cash flow very much, even though we're going to do all that. But we're going to sell it for a ton more than we bought it for. That's the stuff today I'd be very careful with. I acknowledge that worked really, really well for, a handful of years. Gosh, from 2016 all the way up to 2022, people just crushed it on that strategy. But those same people are really hurting today for the stuff they bought in 2021, 2022. So I would still be very careful with that stuff.
Yeah, the first thing that I look at when I'm looking at a slide deck is what kind of debt they're taking. And when the debt looks good, I'm like, I'm already like way ahead of the curve because it's like, okay, you have like, a 6% or less fixed rate debt, okay. Like I'm already in good shape. That's because that's what the problem. Those people who crushed it were thinking they were going to keep crushing it. So they're going into these floating rate debts. And now, now they're in big trouble. And
Jonathan, goes back to what we were talking about. The only reason they were able to get that property at that price is because they did bridge debt. A normal bank at fixed rate debt wouldn't have done the deal. And so that, to your point, it's like, if we can get conservative financing to go along with this and we're good with a 6% interest rate fixed for 5 years, then this is our worst case scenario as far as the debt goes. But those guys were like, that bank won't do it because it doesn't work. But let's go get this bridge and best case scenario, we get out of it. But worst case scenario was really bad. And that's what a lot of them are going into right now. So absolutely, debt is huge. Huge part of it.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully we can just give some tips for people who are looking because, I invested in my first syndication last year at 52 and now I like the idea. I like looking at the deck, but I have no interest in like bothering anyone. Like I'm the perfect LP. Just send me the stuff every month. I read through it, maybe send an email. Great job.
Like that's most of our investors what I like. As well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, because you've set up reasonable expectations, there. And I think that's what's important. Of course, if you've gone over the top in the beginning and said something was going to happen, the second that you don't meet your word, you're in trouble as a syndicator because bad things are going to come. Your phone's never going to stop ringing.
It starts making people worried. And they're like, well, what's going on? Yeah,
it really should.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I think those are fair points. So are you pretty much stuck on multifamily for yourself? You just feel like this is your niche?
Yep.
Because you're saying like you want to control yourself and saying like, ooh, self-storage is over there looking pretty good. But nope, I'm going to stick with multifamily.
Yeah. I think I always say I'm not smart enough to do more than one thing. And going back to like, just good mentors and guys like Brian Burke, but so many others. I mean, billionaires that are in completely different industries. I mean, I just always hear they did one thing for a really long time and got really good at it. And we talked about the compound effect, Jonathan, like building up momentum. You can't do that if you're bouncing around. Not as well. I think there's some guys that like got multifamily going and they were like, man, we've got this multifamily team, but I'm raising more capital than deals I can find in multifamily, mobile home parks or self-storage or industrial. Like, it's not that different. And I'll add this team member that knows that, and I'll keep raising capital. I mean, that's totally different, right? But yeah, for me, I'm nowhere close to that. So for me, yeah, I feel like I'm not good enough at multifamily yet. So I want to keep getting better at multifamily. And I'm not quite there with the business, but we're within a year or two of like where we probably have enough capital where I would like to diversify with other guys that are as much of an expert in industrial or mobile home parks as I am in multifamily by that time, and I'll invest with them.
Yeah, that's exactly what I've heard from so many syndicators. They build up, and instead of going to do self-storage themselves, they'll pop into deals with other people that they know who are experts in their field. So you can get a little piece of it with that. That's kind of what I'm doing now.
Yeah,
I don't want to run a syndication, but I like being invested in diversified asset classes. It makes sense to me. And I've never owned multifamily. I've owned commercial stuff, but I've never, I was too young there was no house hacking, people just did it, but I didn't even know what multifamily really was. So I think that's smart too. You said something interesting in the form though, that I wanted to say, because you brought it up a couple of times. And I think it's really helpful for investors out there listening who think like, hey, well, I don't have a special skill set. How am I going to get good at this? So you said here, I haven't done anything spectacular, so anyone can follow in my footsteps if they want to. That's super encouraging for people out there, because a lot of us have, we have degrees or we have business backgrounds, but I don't think that you need that. I just think you have to be an active learner in the business. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's certain things that I enjoy. I am pretty good at math and I really enjoy it. So there's certain things that I enjoy that I guess I'm pretty good at, but there's people that do really well in multifamily that aren't good at math. I think
they should hire someone who's good.
They should hire somebody that is, and they should get good enough at it, or partner with somebody that is. I mean, there's just so many different ways you can do it. But what you said, John, that you have to be willing to learn, willing to read and learn and listen and network, and willing to take some risk. If you're willing to do those things, then you can absolutely do it. I mean, anybody can. It's what's really difficult for people to wrap their minds around is they might look at what I'm doing today and say, well, I could never do that. Well, I couldn't have either when I started. I mean, I'm just blown away by what we're doing today. My wife and I look at each other all the time and we're like, why are people giving us millions of dollars? This is nuts. But it's like, well, because somebody once gave us 100 and we did well with that. And then people gave us 550 and we did really well with that. And so that's why we raise millions today. That's it. But people only gave us 100 because we'd already done a flip and a duplex. So you might not be able to do what you can't fathom doing what I do today, but could you flip a house? I mean, at the time we bought a house that my wife and I was like, okay, worst case scenario, we're paying off 2 mortgages. With what I was making at the time and our spending, again, we were keeping our spending down. We could afford those 2 mortgages. So that's the worst case scenario. We're paying off 2 houses. Okay. They're going to appreciate over time. We're paying them off, right? Good debt on both of them. That's fine. So if anybody can do that, like you could buy another, and it was in our town. We just bought another house in our town and we drove there and flipped. So it's like, you don't have to imagine yourself doing what I'm doing today. Can you do the first step that I did? I think just about anybody can. So go do that step, learn, and then you might feel like you can do a duplex. That was our second step. So that's why I say that, Jonathan, because we took almost the smallest step you could possibly take. And then we took the next step, duplex, and it was a little bit of a jump to go up to the 16, but I think just about anybody could take those small incremental steps that we took.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really helpful for people to know, like, you do need to get on these stairs. Don't try to just jump to the top. I mean, I wouldn't want to be looking at someone who's trying to raise 7 million who's never raised anything. That seems silly. It's a bad investment, no matter what business that you're in, because they don't have the background to really make it work. So I hopefully this can help people get set up with a strong foundation like you had. I think people could really follow your format. And then after the 1 and the 2, they could figure out, you could really go anywhere. You could go to, 10, or you could decide you want to go into a different asset class. But it's a great way to learn by using your own money and just being careful with it before you start asking people for money. It does seem weird, though, to ask people for money if you've never done anything in deals. I see that in the forums all the time. And I'm like, well, why would someone give you money? You have no money yourself. You've never done a deal. You're new to real estate. Like, what's the pitch here? I just don't understand what's going on there.
Yeah, I don't either. That's interesting strategy.
yeah. One that you didn't follow.
No.
Awesome, man. Is the best place for people to find you at threefoldrei.com, and that's the words three foldrei.com.
That's right. Yeah. That website, we got a free ebook there, other educational content. You can communicate or contact us through there and get on our email list and stuff like that. So yeah, go to the website. And then you and I were talking that we're both, pretty active on LinkedIn. That's another spot to find me, Lee Yoder. Try to post on LinkedIn and stay active on there as well.
Yeah, and we were both saying it's actually us who are posting on LinkedIn. If you see me and Lee on LinkedIn, it's really us, because it is being taken over by LinkedIn ghostwriters, as you can tell, because you just need to look for the emojis, and the thing at the bottom says that contact me, and then they highlight their own name. Like, no real person is doing that. It doesn't make any sense. So look out for the real ones on LinkedIn. All right, man. Well, I really appreciate it. It was great to spend the time with you, and I look forward to staying in touch.
You as well. Thanks so much for having me, Jonathan.
Yeah, no problem. All right. That was Lee Yoder of Threefold REI. I'm Jonathan Green. We'll see you next episode. Thanks for sticking around, and I know you know by now that this is episode preview time. If you listen to the whole show and then you keep going, you can get a preview of the next episode that's coming up. And next week, we have Taylor Jones of STR Insights, and we go deep on short-term rentals, and we're always twisting it in a different direction because all of my short-term rental guests have a different level of expertise and a different way of approaching it, and this one is no different. So stick around for the next episode. It's Taylor Jones. We'll see you then.